Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today, Onboarding for Equity, Creating a Path for Retention from the Start. I'm Christopher Dennis, and I'm here with my colleague, Jenn. Jenn, you want to get us started with an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenn Wells. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm currently working at Marlborough School, which is a 7th through 12th grade girls' school in Los Angeles. Although I will say we do have students from different gender backgrounds as well. I'm really excited to be here with you all to tell you about the lessons I learned from my own process. But also, I have a 13-year career in higher education and student affairs. And so, really hoping to bring some of that experience as well into our conversation today. I did my undergrad at UCLA, where I did American Literature and Culture and a minor in Education Studies. I did my master's at NYU, doing higher education administration. And now I'm currently at USC, doing my doctorate of education in organizational change and leadership, and specifically researching chief diversity officers in small liberal arts colleges, and specifically what does it look like for their organizational support. And so again, really excited to be here with all of you today, and I'll hand it back to Chris.
Awesome. Excellent. I always get excited to hear Jenn speak about what's going on because I'm a big fan. So once again, Christopher Dennis, I am the owner and principal consultant of the Campus Culture Group, where I do one-on-one coaching as well as training and workshops for schools and organizations. Um, I also have been a member of the independent school community, most recently working at the Sage Hill School as the director of the Sage Center for Innovative Curriculum. Prior to that, director of equity and diversity at the Collegiate School in New York City. But prior to that, Jenn and I worked at Scripps College in the Dean of Students office, where I served as the Associate Dean of Students. And prior to Scripps, I was at Bowdoin College as Assistant Dean of Student Affairs as well. So we share the higher ed to independent school connection.
Yep.
Also, I am currently a doctoral student at the University of San Diego in education for social justice, where my research focuses on identity development and governance in organizations and schools. So all of this conversation about onboarding for equity really does hit home for both of us in a variety of ways, particularly because we want to know how can we support the people in the spaces. So hopefully this conversation today is relevant for all of you who are tuning into this recording. And depending on where you sit as a hiring manager or a member of the hiring team or a candidate, I think you're going to get a lot of this conversation that's going to be helpful. So a little bit about the why. Retention starts during the hiring process. So for those of you that are building rapport and getting to know each other, these relationships are going to be what actually gets people to see themselves in your schools and into your organization. So we want to make sure that we carry on with that camaraderie, that sense of community, that affinity with the actual work that they're actually signing up to do. Because we can find that the unwritten rules and norms of the institutions can serve as a type of a trap door for what it means to have full access to membership within the community. And what I found is that there are a lot of impacts of assimilation once you get into schools. The voice that you came in with, the things that you liked to do in your classroom to stand out, sometimes you can start to shave off those edges because you feel like the norms of the space, the building, or the Zoom call require you to change who you are. And we want people to be fully themselves because that's the beauty of independent schools. So this workshop will help candidates and hiring groups bridge the gap between the hire and the successful first year. And we're going to center equity and inclusion practices within our conversation. So let's go ahead and get into the dynamics of entering a new school and what brings joy and a foundation of hope. Jenn?
Awesome. So we kind of wanted to give you an idea of what our format will look like today. We know the power of folks who come from marginalized backgrounds is in our storytelling. And so we're really hoping to start our session today with both of us kind of sharing our story about onboarding. And so I'll be sharing specifically about how I was onboarded to Marlborough and a little bit about my position and what it was look like to do that. And then Chris will also be sharing his story. And then we're hoping to get into some action items, and we'll be going through those one by one and kind of doing a little bit of discussion in between, asking each other some questions, learning more about even each other's journeys and how those action items show up in the work that we've done together and then separately. And then, yeah, end with a good discussion and close us out. So that's what we have headed for us today. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into my story. So, like we said, we're going to start with some stories about our own onboarding process. And for me, I'm going to talk specifically about what that looked like for my position at Marlborough. I am proud to say that I was a candidate with Carney Sando, which was a really excellent kind of relationship with a recruiting firm, and being able to kind of establish that relationship with them to identify what I was looking for in a position. As Chris mentioned, I'm coming from Scripps College and Claremont colleges, where I was working as an assistant dean and director of essentially the multicultural and social justice education space. And what I was really looking for was the next step. What did it look like to oversee multiple departments? What did it look like to be on the senior leadership team? And so I was really excited when Carney Sando brought Marlborough as a potential to me as a candidate. And so I really want to take home and emphasize what Chris said around what does it mean that the retention of a candidate starts at hiring. And I'm hoping to get into that with my story. And so for me, I was looking for a position that did not place the emphasis of a diversity officer or place the emphasis of the work solely on a diversity officer. I was really looking for a school that had been engaged in the work, that was not looking for a scapegoat or something traumatic happened, that they were looking for a director of equity and inclusion to kind of come in and just fix. And so part of how I did that as a candidate and addressing that and looking at that was actually my interview questions for Marlborough. And so as I met with different teachers, different administrators, even with the students and board of trustees and parents and my head of school, it was really important for me to get an understanding of like, where was the school at with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how did the new director kind of fit into that? Well, I was really, really relieved and seeing now that I benefit from a lot of the work that had been done before I even got to Marlborough. We have a really amazing head of school, Dr. Sands, who had already been leading Marlborough in the work of DEI for around 2 or 3 years. Not only that, our school was up for a new strategic plan. And with that plan, it was headed by a trustee of color, for example. And also the mission statement became equity leads education. And so all of our principles fall under that. Not only that, that's kind of like the structural, right? Like having a strategic plan that was already doing the work. But for me, it was also cultural. When I talked to every person in my interview and asked them questions about their role in DEI, it was very clear that each of them was able to articulate what their kind of stake in the game was, right? It wasn't like, oh, the DEI director is going to do XYZ. It was really about like, oh, what I'm thinking about in my curriculum and what I've kind of changed about what I'm teaching is XYZ. I'm really looking for a sounding board, or I'm really looking for someone who could help me identify those best practices. It was very clear that the school had taken up the DEI work and wasn't just relying on whoever came into this role to take that on. And so again, I assessed a lot of that through my own interview with Marlborough and was really excited to say yes. And so that kind of takes us then into the official onboarding process. For me, I feel really fortunate that we had an amazing associate head of school who really took on the work of integrating me into the school very seriously. She set up appointments for me with folks across the school so that I can get not only the priorities in place. So I was meeting with folks like, we had a student orientation that had to come up really quickly, and she made sure I met with them to talk about those things, but also what were some of those folks that are quintessential cultural aspects of the school culture, and made sure that I was meeting with them to talk about what work were they engaged in with DEI, what was the role that they were hoping I would play in that conversation. And so having those appointments set up for me and not having me kind of on my own going, I wonder who I should talk to today. And really having her background, and she's amazing and has worked at the school for quite a while in many different functions. She was able to kind of leverage her knowledge of the school to make sure I was meeting with who I needed to meet with. Um, Another aspect of my onboarding process was we have a very robust new faculty and staff program at Marlborough, which one includes a mentorship program. So I was assigned a mentor. I feel really fortunate that the mentor I received was someone who identified as Black, as do I. And we were able to have some of those conversations of what is it like to be a Black member of the Marlborough community, and really have those tough conversations that I might not feel comfortable asking of maybe of white colleagues, for example. And so that was really, really helpful. Additionally, as part of that new faculty and staff program, we had several meetings with new faculty and staff. We had different trainings. Over the summer, our faculty and staff actually engaged in an online course related to anti-racist training and social emotional learning. And again, that was a really great intro into getting a better sense of what the culture at the school was. In addition to that, I would say informally, I was connected with someone who kind of became my safe person on the senior leadership team. As the director of equity and inclusion, I get to sit on the senior leadership team and really needed a safe space to be like, hey, what does this mean? Or what's this about? And really quickly got a safe space to kind of admit that I didn't know something, or ask about something that was culturally showing up in our meetings, and really become a sounding board so that I could strategically think through those things. The last piece I'll say is I really, really appreciated that the person who sat on my hiring committee from Marlborough continued to develop a relationship with me. She was actually another resource. So beyond the mentor, beyond the safe person on the senior leadership team, she really became this person that would check on me and make sure I was doing okay. She would ask me if I had any questions going on. And that was super helpful. And again, she was actually Black identified, which was super helpful for me. Um, and so thank you for listening to my story. And I guess that I just want to highlight some takeaways that I was hoping to highlight through my story. So one is kind of what is the work that you need to do as a school community in order to think about retention and onboarding, right? So for example, if you're bringing on a new African-American lit teacher, for example, is the English department ready to support that person? Are they familiar with their work? Are they familiar with what it takes to support that person in the curriculum that they're proposing? The other things are, what are the support systems on campus and how might you integrate that into the hiring process? And so things like a mentorship program, or the role of the hiring committee, or also affinity groups, for example. I got to meet with all of the advisors to the student affinity groups, and that was really amazing because most of them were folks of color or part of the queer community, which are our identities I share, and that was super important to getting a good look at the school. And so, do you have those in place? And I would say on the candidate side of that, like, ask about these things, ask about what these resources look like so that you're aware. And then lastly, again, what are those unofficial safe spaces? So again, for me, that kind of looked like that person that I made friends with on the senior leadership team, but also the person who served on my hiring committee, who ended up being a close friend and someone I could talk to. And so that's my story and my high level takeaways. And so Chris wanted to hand it back to you or ask if you had questions.
Well, Jenn has already booked and finished the session, so everyone can go. But I agree. A lot of your onboarding story resonates with me a great deal, because I've been in spaces where having the support of colleagues at various levels really does allow you to affirm that you're in the right spot. And also, the dynamic of this particular hiring conference with Carney Sando is the fact that it is for marginalized identifying people. So we want to make sure that we're having the conversation about what does it mean to be mentored or paired with somebody who closely identifies with you in at least one or more aspects, because the unofficial spaces can become official spaces if they're the person that you go to every day. So a little bit for me, I'm going to try to combine a few different onboarding stories from various places I've been. I recall onboarding at Bowdoin College and being starstruck to a degree of just the beauty of the campus and the things that were going on there, and not really having a place to process how I was feeling with that. So for me, my assistant at the time was huge because we would walk campus for our meetings,
Mhm.
and she would give me pieces of advice along the way. And again, being able to understand that you can connect with people in various ways. So spend the time getting to know people. So for me, the biggest thing that I can say is spend the time listening to just about everybody. You're going to get kind of cues of people you need to listen to, but the person that's swiping your card at the front gate, the people that are doing the cleaning of the office, everybody, you just need to check in with them, get to know people, because they're going to see you on a bad day and they're going to want to take care of you and provide you that support. Um, I had so many things to learn at various places that I knew I needed to ask a ton of questions. So even after the contract conversations were done and onboarding was to begin, I wanted to be ready for opening meetings. I wanted to be ready for all of these experiences that I was going to be a part of, because I wanted to contribute. So I would say take the time to find out the dynamics of the meetings you're going to be a part of. Ask your hiring team, your hiring manager, or department chair, what do you need me to do to get ready for the first week of classes? What do you need me to do for the curriculum night or the open house? Some of the small things that are just aspects of your job can be big things if you don't know what's expected of you. And when we talk about an equitable experience, sometimes people are just going to expect you to know where to get the information. And that's a bias that we see in a lot of different places, right? I didn't come from an independent school background, so I'm not necessarily going to know all of the acronyms and the journey that I need to take to get ready for any of this stuff. So it's good to have somebody that can kind of translate those things for you. But sometimes as a hiring manager, you want to preemptively show that you're ready to translate those things, not because you're prescribing what they need to do, but because you care and you say like, okay, hey, here's some information that may be helpful. You let me know if you want to talk about it a little bit further. So one of the things I like to really talk about is asking people, how do they like to receive information? If you're going through this process as a candidate or a hiring manager, once the deal's all said and done, you may have a quiet period for a couple weeks, right? So ask, how frequently do you want to be in communication? How can we check in? How can we connect? So those are just some small things that I think can really help kind of get over the hump of onboarding. One of the things I wanted to bring up takes place about 8 to 9 weeks into the semester, that first grading period. All right. So if you are a faculty and even some administrators, that first grading period is where you have to be critical and you have to give constructive feedback to your students and maybe even peers. And that is not the best time to say you did not complete your comments in the appropriate manner, or you need to give a little more finesse in letting students submit this type of work in this level of course. Whatever the norms are that you need to have understood, get those out in the open extremely early, because as a person from a marginalized background coming into a predominantly white institution, I am not going to particularly receive the fact that you want me to change anything about the way I grade or deliver my content in a productive or a constructive manner if you do it the day before comments are due. Is it fair that you're asking this person that is new to your community to sit up all night and rewrite their comments? Do they even know that they're going to be asked to rewrite their comments? Right. So some of the things that may be beneficial to knowing, let's make sure that you tell the entire cohort of new hires. Because another aspect that can also feel marginalizing is that if I'm one of 4 new hires in the school, I happen to be the only person of my identity, and I'm the only one who's getting told these tips. That can make me feel like I'm doing it wrong because of the way I show up in space. So instead of just going to this individual, get it out all in the open as early as possible, because the fact that really matters is, in an equity standpoint, is that we all need the same information. We all need it at the same time. So that way there is no confusion. Okay. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let me go back. A couple other questions you want to ask. What are the things that are expected of me from professional development? What about conferences? Is it an issue if I attend conferences? Is it an issue if I attend more than one conference? POCC is almost a given. But you want to make sure that you know what's going on here. So that's a little bit about that. When Jenn and I worked together at Scripps College, I tried to make sure that Jenn had a really positive onboarding experience. And for me, it started with the first interview all the way through the interview day. So here at the conference, a lot of you are going to make that first connection, and then it's going to lead to a follow-up conversation, maybe an on-campus or a Zoom interview. And what I like to tell candidates when they're going through the interview process is, I want to see every one of you win, right? So I'm going to tell you, hey, this is your schedule for the day. You've got 9 meetings. It's a gauntlet. You're going to be tired, but here's what you need to know about each of these constituency groups, so that way you can be effective. So I ask you, hiring managers, how can you put your candidates in a position to be successful during their interview day? You want to make sure that you're giving them a heads up for any of the hurdles, any of the things that may catch them off guard, especially because things can happen during the day. There could be an issue that happened in the lunchroom or an issue that happened in a middle school English class that may impact the interview in itself. So you want to try to be nimble, but be fair and be generous with giving information. Is that stacking the deck? No, it's not. It's really giving people a chance to see themselves at their best. Jenn, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I think sometimes we have this idea that, like, by giving context, like, we won't get them at their, like, we're stacking the deck, as you said, right? And I think that comes from this mentality that's competition, and sometimes probably, I'll venture to say, based in white supremacist culture, right? What would it, we know that in our meetings during the day, in our usual jobs, how often do we not get like some context, right? When we have a partner that's helping us, right? For example, like, I know there's been times where me and Chris are in our work at Scripps, we have a parent that we might need to meet with. Of course, I'm going to call Chris and be like, hey, here's the rundown. Here's what we've done with this parent for this student. So that Chris can then show up in the best way possible, because like he said, I want to see you win, right? And so it's not like, oh, well, here's the answer that you need to give the committee, but it might be more of like, hey, something really big that happened up on our campus was this. You might want to talk about your philosophy around addressing this. That's not stacking the deck. That's really setting everyone up so that candidate can have the best interview possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just jump into some action steps here.
Let's
So one of the things I think could be really helpful is the new hire orientation. As I said, that's a great place to set all of your expectations for grading policies and the way you want faculty and staff to interact with students, parents, and different constituents. But it's a very important time to review all of your social justice, anti-bias, anti-racist policies, philosophies, and the like. It doesn't do us any good if they just stay buried in the handbook. And if they're not in the handbook, they need to be in the handbook, because that is the mandate of where you're going to hold everyone accountable. So as a candidate or a new hire, when I come in and I hear that allows me to be on the same playing field with everyone else in that room. My cohort of people, we are starting with the right information from the beginning. Jenn, what do you think about the policy combo?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like what I shared earlier about our robust, like, new faculty and staff. Absolutely, we were meeting with HR, we were meeting with student life, all of that. We were even talking about what's in the student policy handbook, right? All of that's going to be very vital to making sure that folks are on the same page and have that, again, that successful start.
Another aspect to that onboarding or that orientation conversation is to discuss who to go to for resolution if there are things that kind of come apart. Do you want your new team member to go to someone who's going to kind of give them the ad hoc or the homemade approach to solving a problem, or do you want someone to have the true flow of communication of how they can get their needs met? And you also want to model that by sharing a story of how you as the leader have taken those same steps.
Mhm.
So it's easy to say, well, if you have any problems, always just go go see Susie in HR, you'll be fine. And that sounds scary. So no one wants to go see Susie in HR, and you don't want people to go see Susie in HR. But if you do want them to start with their chair or their division head, just say that. But you have to exchange like an experiential story of how that has been productive. Additionally, you want to talk about where opportunities for affinity exist. Now, you don't want to do this because you assume someone identifies a particular way, because the worst thing you can do is try to prescribe and assign someone to a group. So in your orientation, what opportunities are you allowing people to speak through their identity in a way where they have the option to share and they have the option to engage on that level? So one of the things at Collegiate that was really powerful was the opportunity for the faculty and staff of color affinity group to gather and have kind of seasoned staff members and faculty talk to newer staff members and faculty. But we realized that there was a gap. We did not do anything in this all boys school for female identifying faculty, because we realized that there was an opportunity to really take care of a need that wasn't met from that perspective. So be creative, but be broad in giving an opportunity to experience and express identity and how that plays into the benefits of affinity. And last, as Jenn said, mentoring or buddy programs, they can be huge, but how are we vetting those people that participate? Are you just telling everyone in their third year that they will be a buddy, they will be a mentor? What aspects of cultural competence and anti-bias training should these individuals have as they come into that mentorship and buddy responsibility? Because there could be some disconnect, right? Jenn, as a chief diversity officer, what kind of things would you like to see from mentors or buddies as they are paired with individuals who are new to the community?
So my internet cut out, to be honest with you. Can you repeat that one more time for me?
Sure. What are some of the things that you would like to see mentors and buddies have in their toolkit as they meet with a new hire faculty or staff member?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of that is like really getting a good agenda for your first meeting, right? What are those key factors that you need to get across? I think thinking about your own experience and then making a list of what might come across for that person so that you can go through them bullet by bullet. Some of those are like as easy as like, where do I get my keys? But some of them might be, like you said and alluded to earlier, what are some of the main acronyms for the campus? What are some of the main cultural things that might be showing up in meetings? I think like being able to have that list and like you said, we don't want to like Susie and HR can be helpful. Maybe Susie and HR can actually help create the list of like, here's what all buddies should be discussing. And then thinking about what unique opportunity are there based on the actual position that's at hand.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So your department head, hiring managers, if your department head is either the person who is in charge of the process or a member on that team, we really want to make sure department heads feel empowered to support a new faculty member, or a department chair or department lead to support a new staff member. I would recommend that if you're in these leadership roles, to be prepared to speak to or make a statement about how you implement your own equity or social justice practices within your department. It doesn't have to be extensive, and if it makes you uncomfortable, then you probably should work with your diversity team or someone in your office to really help you process through that. But you definitely need to express where you've shown areas of growth. Because if I am a new faculty member coming into this all white department, I may have some questions that I'm not going to ask because I'm just really excited about getting the opportunity. It's the most money I've ever made. I love this campus. I've never been in this part of the country, so I'm gonna slow play it. So you can do your new hire. You can do them a great service by just saying like, listen, as a department, we've spent a couple years trying to diversify our curriculum. We've fallen short in a couple areas, but what I've learned as a chair in the last year, 2 years, 3 years is that I need to ... And
Yeah.
I'm going to ... You can hold me accountable by ... Okay. Because what that will allow is really a line of communication to open up where the burden and the responsibility does not have to live with the new hire pushing through all these dynamics and politics of social interaction, you're able to make it clear and plain, and they're going to trust everything you say. So give them the opportunity to hear from you directly, of sharing some of that truth and some of that story before, friction or things have to happen. Jen, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think like I love the point you meant asked about like how do you hold me accountable to that, right? For me, part of that conversation also is like, and we review the curriculum every year for the teaching for tolerance, social justice standards, right? Here's actually where they're located in our scope and sequence for our curriculum. Here's where, like you said, here's where we're falling short. Our Marlborough actually just underwent a process where each department had engaged their department in intentions, right? Like how were they going to address instances of oppression or bias or harm in the classroom? What were they going to do to work on that? What were they going to do, and have them explicitly stated? So like you said, like there's this transparency. The candidate can then know explicitly where you stand and what they can hold you to, right? It's not just these magical words; they're actually written and actually shared, and there's accountability amongst the school. And so, yeah, I think that that's wonderful. Absolutely.
Along those same lines about being ready for how to respond, I think it's important for us to really talk about what does it look like when students or caregivers push back in various ways via email, or they go over your faculty's head and want to go straight to the department or the head of school, right? How do you prepare your team member to be able to be a part of that conversation, and maybe not just receive a directive of just going to go change something that happened? The need to know that you're heard and you've been listened to when you need to really respond to some of those things is critical.
Mhm.
So I'm a big fan of just expressing what are your pressure points as a leader, so that way your team knows how to respond. Um, and as you hear yourself express those pressure points, you'll start to learn if you really need to make them responsible for catering to making you the most comfortable. It is helpful to say, hey, when parents call me, that's rough. I don't like getting those calls, so can we limit what happens to get those calls? But that doesn't mean you want your team member to kind of shapeshift. But you share that information to say it can happen, right? It can happen. So how do you want pushback to be managed, and consider being on the other foot. So as a candidate or a new hire, when you have an instance where you're in an email and you see that they've CC'd your head of school, um, it can be terrifying. You've probably been through that in various ways, but give yourself the opportunity to talk through it with your department chair and just kind of move up the chain of command to have those conversations. Um, in some instances, you need to be ready to hear the feedback.
Yeah.
You may be ready, need to be ready to hear kind of the criticism, but you should be able to have a true, open, and honest dialogue about that pushback. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it almost kind of relates to our discussion about department heads. I think about just our political climate right now, for example, and I know a lot of teachers were struggling. Like, one, our teachers pride themselves on kind of like their students can't guess what political affiliation that they are, right? But I think in kind of navigating what's come up with white supremacy and white supremacists, if you will, and insurrection, for example, I know a lot of teachers are wondering like, can I say this, right? Like, is an email going to go from a parent to the division head? Am I going to get in trouble if I say something that directly challenges white supremacy? And so, how, as you as hiring managers or leaders, able to kind of assure candidates that they can make certain stances on things, or be clear about what they can't, right? So, like things like not endorsing a political party, right? Being clear about that, clear about what it looks like, so that then your new hire can do what they need to do in the classroom. Another way that kind of showed up for us recently was the environment of Zoom. We know that in the classroom before, right? it's just you and your students, and some things leave by hearsay, but it's really just you having that interaction with your students. But in the time of Zoom, we don't know who's lingering in the background in terms of parents who might have different political affiliations or different identities than their students. They might not know that their students are trans or part of the queer community. So what does it look like? How can you support our teachers, and what does it look like to give clear expectations about what they can expect from you if a caregiver, like Chris said, like raises something? Can they trust that you have their back? And if you're clear on what you probably won't have their back on, how do you let them know so that they can make the appropriate decisions and move accordingly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another kind of subtopic under just pushback and just general things. The way you are to address your colleagues. Titles absolutely are important. So if my good friend Jenn will be uh, given the honor of presenting a dissertation and achieving the doctorate status
Yeah.
this summer. So at that point, I will no longer refer to Jenn as Jenn. As a friend, I'm going to call Jenn Dr. Wells forever. And I think being able to honor the credential that someone has attained, if that is how they would like to be addressed, is the way we need to stand up and make sure they would like to be addressed. So if a student, if colleagues are demoting a person based on whatever the reasons are, as hiring managers and members of leadership teams, we need to stand up and step in. It's just unacceptable for people to have that additional fight because of their own insecurities or things of that nature. So that I just wanted to mention that a little bit, because there's been times where I've seen faculty being either belittled, demoted, berated for whatever reason, and it comes down to how they're being addressed, be it a faculty knowing how they want to be addressed and either misgendering them, calling them by dead names, not using the proper titles, and the like. Jenn, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I'm like, okay, we're talking about onboarding. I kind of want to just interject like general DEI practice, right? Something might come up like, I've heard stories for schools where, oh, we call the faculty by Dr. and Mr., but we call the janitorial staff by first name, like making sure that that's something you're also actively thinking about in terms of new hires, right? We're not just talking about our faculty. Everyone should be kind of honored and respected in that kind of way as adults on campus. And so how do you ensure that that's happening? Yeah, otherwise, thank you. You said it.
Yeah, I almost had my own like out of body experience. We almost started a different session just now. So
Right, exactly.
that's okay. You've got plenty of sessions, folks. Can you tell us a little bit about how we can utilize the experiences of the Dear and the Black at Instagram pages within the onboarding process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for many schools this past summer, in 2020, we saw our students write us these unique love letters, right? So either that was our Black students with Black at accounts on Instagram sharing really horrific moments of pain, moments of discrimination, moments of racism in their schools, moments of being silenced or being unseen or being treated unfairly. And similarly, I know we also had our own account, and it was a Dear Marlborough, and they kind of named it a Dear kind of a different kind of love letter, right? Where students were really sharing with us the ways that they've been harmed in an attempt to kind of help us see what we needed to address as a school. And so I can imagine that can make you kind of nervous, right? What can it like? Ooh, are my candidates going to find this account? Yes, probably. They probably looked that up actually while they were researching you, right? They know that that account exists. They've read through it. So how do we leverage that, right? So part of that means being able to explicitly know what's on that account. And then if your candidate has questions or if you proactively want to raise issues. So for example, if you have trends around how students of color are being treated in the disciplinary process, being able to talk proactively to your candidate about how you've been working on that or plan to work on it, right? And so really thinking about those trends, and then again, either one, how has the institution been working on it, but also perhaps thinking about like, okay, here's what teachers should be on the lookout for. For example, at Marlborough, one of the things that we made sure that we did was think about how do we respond to harm, right? We had a lot of instances on our own account of students who have reported, or alumni of students who reported that they told their teacher that a microaggression occurred, and the teacher, responded the best way they knew how, which might be to dismiss it, might be to like kind of address it in the moment and take it no further. But what we did was really focus on the training needed to mark it, to take responsibility, to hold folks accountable, to engage in the uncomfortable conversation of if it's a student told you that you committed the microaggression, how do you respond in a way that doesn't invalidate the student? How do you track it as a school to see if there are patterns to either contribute to climate or to maybe show the need for further training, right? Those are all ways that you can think about not being ashamed of what's in these accounts, but really to own it and take accountability for it, and know that these are likely things that are on the minds of your new faculty and staff. They want to know how it's being addressed, because we know that when this shows up for our students, it's often also showing up for faculty and staff in your institution as well.
That's huge. That's huge. I think about, when we're afraid to have conversations about things that are publicly known, it really creates an atmosphere of like, okay, we're just going to calcify that moment and we're just not going to talk about it any further, which means what are we doing to smaller moments? To Jen's point, like if we can't address a microaggression, then what can we actually address and achieve? So through this conversation, we didn't want you to feel like it was just this heavy and it's a fight and a battle to stick around. But as professionals, we want to make sure that that there is a recipe for success and that you can get through these things. Communication is at the core of it all. And being an equitable school and having an anti-bias lens means that you have to demonstrate where you've been and where your areas of growth have been as well. And there are so many people that can be partners with you in the work. You just have to open up and ask and invite folks in. So, we're winding down on our time here. So Jenn, if you wanted to kind of reiterate anything or offer a close for the folks.
Yeah, so Chris is really helpful for me remembering that we have two kinds of audience members, or maybe three. But thinking about, I think when I talked a lot, I was talking more to our hiring managers and folks on the hiring side of things. But what I'll say to our candidates is, excuse me, what I'll say to our candidates is like everything we talked about to tell the hiring managers to make sure they're doing, you can ask about these things. And I wouldn't, it doesn't necessarily have to be a long list, laundry list where you're asking them and check, but it can be like, can you talk to me about the experiences of faculty of color? Can you talk to me about how your disciplinary process has evolved, right? And that gets you more access to what's the school doing that can be that environment that you can thrive in, right? And so it kind of puts the responsibility on both, right? I always think about that very much cliche thing of saying it's just as much an interview for them as it is for you. And so make sure you get what you need answered so that you and the institution can make the best decision for each other.
Awesome. I'd say a few things because one, my approach is education for liberation. So when we come into independent schools, I understand that it's a space that has tremendous opportunities for individuals, not only the students and the caregivers, but also for the faculty and staff to really be a part of something special. And when we let the logo of the institution lead everything, we lose sight of ourselves. So I want everybody to understand that the schools are successful because of what we bring into them each time we step into the spaces. So schools need you to be authentic. They need you to be critical in the right ways. But we also have to be responsible and accountable for the things that we're bringing and discovering. You may have to do a great deal of unlearning prior behaviors and norms and ways of being in terms of your previous school that you worked at, and coming into this new one. You may need to be able to ask an uncomfortable question just so that you have clarity. You may stand out for a moment, but think about years 3, 4, and 5. When you have that information, how you're going to really be able to hit your stride after you've gotten a good rhythm going. So we want to make sure that individuals are able to start strong, so that they can have wonderful and thriving careers. The students are going to pull out of you everything they need.
Mhm.
So you're going to prepare a lot. You're going to have a lot ready. I made a post on LinkedIn. I said, you don't need all those slides all the time, because sometimes you just being in the space and activating a dialogue with students or your colleagues is all that they're going to need. So remember why you're in the work, and make sure you understand that it's an exchange. And if you are only looking to take things from the experience, you're not honoring the moment. So you want to make sure you're ready to exchange some things as well. And even as you're looking at schools and considering places to check into, be honest about how you're feeling. If you're nervous, if something doesn't feel too clear, let the person on the hiring side know. They need that information. And likewise, hiring folks, it's okay to be vulnerable. I know you got to make a hire. I know you got a class to fill. I know you need all those seats, but let's make sure that we get people that can understand where we are as a school and make the journey with us at that moment, so we can keep going. So with that, I think we've given you a few things to think about. You should see somewhere on the screen how to contact us. We're going to put that in post-production. But, again, I am Christopher Dennis, and my wonderful colleague, Jenn
And
Wells.
well,
We wish you the best and much success this hiring season, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
awesome. Bye, everyone.